Being a movie critic isn't always that easy. I mean, sure, maybe watching a few bad movies is something that can be draining. But I'm not even talking about that. Sometimes you witness a few movies that are so incredibly crazy that it's maybe too much to take in. As this is going to be a very different series of reviews this time around. So let's not waste too much time with this and get started. First movie I'm going to be talking about is the new A24 horror film, Men. This was certainly one of the more interesting films I was looking forward to this summer, namely because it's from Alex Garland, the director of Ex Machina and Annihilation. Though, what got me curious was, unlike his previous two films, this was a straight up horror film with not too many sci-fi elements this time around. Though I think it was still going to be interesting, especially when considering that the best aspects of Annihilation were the horror elements. So, going into Men and being an A24 horror film was definitely something I was interested in. Coming out of the movie, I have to say, there's a lot to love about this movie as a horror film. Right off the bat, this is one of the most unsettling films I have ever witnessed. Men is a deeply disturbing film that isn't afraid to take risks at all, and it's truly an ambitious piece of work from Garland, which is saying something. The film centers around a woman going to a vacation home to escape from her own personal trauma, though things go awry when she starts seeing these strange men around in this seemingly peaceful area. And that's as far as I'll go with the plot, because one of the great things about this movie is how it grabs you in and gets you invested into the story and characters. It's a film that really dives into dark, real-world horrors, and as the title suggests, it does heavily discusses themes of misogyny, but in a way that makes it very thought-provoking. Granted, warning you right now, this is not a movie for everyone. I say so because this is a film that really goes into very dark themes of abuse, gaslighting, and so many other things that would be very upsetting for any viewer who cannot handle movies that tackle dark themes. It also doesn't help that even for someone like me who watched Requiem for a Dream at way too young of an age, this film really got under my skin. But definitely as intended. Alex Garland did an incredible job making this film feel atmospheric with excellent use of sound and music, and some incredible cinematography that almost feels Terrence Malick-like in some ways. Just a lot more disturbing and surreal at points. It also benefits from a few fantastic performances by Jessie Buckley and Rory Kinnear. Both do a great job, with Buckley really making you feel the trauma this character is going through, and Kinnear playing multiple different roles, and all of them are effectively creepy in different ways. They carry this film big time, making this movie very engaging, but also terrifying in terms of how it really gets under your skin. I would say that honestly, with all of these elements at play here, this ends up being without a doubt one of the most effective horror films I have ever seen. It was leading up to be one of the best ones for how it really captures that sense of dread these characters are feeling and relating to themes that stuck with me throughout the entirety of this movie. And then you get to the third act of this film, which all I gotta say is, what? I mean, if we're talking easily one of the most shocking and downright appalling images I have seen in any horror movie, this is it. I mean, to an extent, I do kind of adore what Alex Garland is going for, because it does stick with you big time. And by the end of it, it does go back to these themes of this movie and on how it handles sexism in various ways. By the real end of it, I was really taking a lot in, and I liked a lot of the questions this movie asked in terms of how it relates to these themes. And I think the conclusion can vary for some people, but certainly makes for some good debates. It's just a shame I can't tell you what happened, because one, that would be spoiling it, and I genuinely don't want to do that for those who want to see this movie. And two, its climax is so insanely graphic and gory that I simply don't want to put that image in your head at all. So you have to either see the movie for yourself or read up on it. Either way, I don't think people should be shocked anymore that Doctor Strange 2 wasn't rated R, because I'm genuinely amazed this didn't get away with an NC-17 rating for how brutal this ending is. It is such an extreme that to a good extent, I think Alex Garland might have dropped the ball when it comes to the ending. Like, I'm debating whether or not he went too far with it. Still, for all of its strangeness, it managed to be a very effective horror film for being really smart with its theme and also feeling genuinely unsettling as a film. I don't recommend this film to everyone because it's so extreme at points and goes into such dark territory that it really isn't for the faint of heart. But if you're someone like me, or a horror movie buff in general, you'll definitely find some beautiful things to discuss and analyze with A24's Men. Even if its ending is still an insane what the f, it could still hold the title of being one of the most unsettling horror films I have sat through in recent memory. So take that for what it's worth. And I'm going to give A24's Men a 9 out of 10. Like I said though, it's not a movie for everyone with its content and what it has to offer. But if you do see this movie, for the love of God, don't do what I did by making it a double feature with the next movie I'm going to talk about. Because honestly, I have no idea which was more shockingly what the f***, witnessing the end of that film or the pure insanity that was Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers on Disney Plus. Now, I think everyone knows the characters of Chip and Dale at this point, and also fondly remember the classic TV show of the Disney afternoon. I know I have, as this was a show I did watch a lot of back when it was on Toon Disney, and I really enjoyed it quite a bit for what it was. I still remember and think fondly of a lot of the things associated with it. I remember Monty and Zipper, I remember that kick-ass theme song, I remember potentially almost becoming a furry because I thought Gadget was kinda cute. Hell, I even played that awesome NES game from Capcom where you kill enemies by throwing boxes. It's a fun time. So, when a movie was announced for it, I wasn't really sure what to expect. Well, initially probably something kinda bad, but after watching the trailer for this movie, I didn't know what to make of it. There were things I liked, things I hated, and things I just didn't know what to make of because, much like Space Jam 2, it seemed like it was throwing so much at you in such a random mishmash of shit that I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But that curiosity did get the best of me, so I decided to check it out and see if this ended up being legit decent or just more insanity. And after watching it, well, more insanity is right, I'll tell you that much. But I also say, as far as these kind of movies go, there's more decent elements that make it a genuinely enjoyable film. The plot centers on Chip and Dale teaming up once again to solve the whereabouts of one of their close friends in typical Rescue Ranger fashion, just with a lot more pop culture references and a lot more meta humor. But I'd be lying if I said there weren't some things to admire. For a premise that is Chip and Dale going on a mystery case, it sticks with it pretty well, making it a better movie than Space Jam 2. Well, yes, it does have a lot of in-jokes, they do keep their focus on the plot pretty alright with these characters, and I say it's mostly due to the dynamic between Chip and Dale themselves. Yeah, hearing them with actual voices is still jarring, but the actors still do a decent job having these characters have a great dynamic with one another. It also helps that this film manages to be a pretty impressive one from an animation standpoint, or more particularly in this case, the world building of this live action hybrid world. It's a lower end Roger Rabbit, as it's trying to be a world where toons and reality coexist, but to their credit, the melding between the two is actually done pretty well here. It's mostly due to the fact that they do incorporate a lot of different kinds of characters and animation styles, making this world feel very alive as this very expressive world that does have some genuinely funny moments. There's a lot of creativity with what they do when making funny jabs and pop culture references in relationship to animation. It's not just animated character being animated for the sake of it like Tom and Jerry 2021. They do make it a point that these characters are in a Roger Rabbit style alternate world. It still does it in a lot of meta ways, but also done with some cleverness to it, as some of the things it makes fun of are actually pretty fitting for the kind of movie it strives to be. As someone who likes seeing that, it does become a very enjoyable film in that regard. But again, much like the last movie I reviewed, there's a lot of stuff that would, for lack of a better term, just make me simply go, what? Because this is a film that throws a lot at you. And while it's not always cringe, it does have some things that are a little bit more questionable or weird, and I'm not sure in a good way. While I say the animation is really good for the most part, with how they incorporate different styles and aesthetics, they fall kind of short when it comes to the animation on the main 2D characters. Instead of making them 2D animated, Chip and some of the other Rescue Rangers are in this cel-shaded CG style that looks a little choppy. Like, it's not really that smooth and feels like it's restrained to what 2D animated characters can actually do in regards to movement. I think they did this to make it so Dale, whose CGI works off against Chip easier, but it really would have been more impressive if they had Chip be hand-drawn and for the CGI Dale to work off of him rather than the other way around. It would have looked more natural, as this animation feels like it could be more. When you see it as a frame, it looks alright, but when it's actually moving, it does look a bit off. It especially is an issue when the rest of the non-main 2D animated characters look really nice in comparison, if I say so myself, which I'll go on to talking about the other characters, as there are a lot of cameos in this movie, and in some ways it makes sense because of the kind of Roger Rabbit style world they're living in, but at the same time, some of these characters who appear don't amount to much, yet it's so fucking strange to see some of these characters in a movie like this regardless of how long they're actually in it. And that's not even including the one that was already spoiled on Twitter, which I won't say who that is, except for all of you wishing this thing came into existence instead of what we actually ended up getting. Congratulations! Your wish came true at Disney. There's so many cameos that occur in this movie, and the way some of them are implemented, I guess, are kind of funny in some ways, but also funny in a what the fuck am I watching sort of way. Though that being said, I won't say who it is, but the post-credits cameo was easily the best one. Not just because of the hype, but also, out of all the cameos that appeared in this movie, it's the one that makes the most sense. There's even other characters that appear in this movie that aren't just character cameos, but some of them are kind of mixed too. I like this claymation character played by J.K. Simmons, but the other human girl doesn't give the best performance. No offense to the actress, but Bob Hoskins and Roger Rabbit, she ain't. Plus, there's even a questionable thing dealing with the main villain of this movie that I'm not sure was entirely done in the best taste, considering some of the history behind it. It's not as bad because they also critique that aspect within the film, but at the same time, there's a lot that could have been done with it that maybe would have been in better taste. Oh, and as for the Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers license, they do some neat things with it, but also some things that definitely were questionable and definitely resulting in numerous what the fucks from me. I'm not going to say much for spoilers' sake, except for the fact that thanks to this movie, I will never think of these two characters the same ever again. So this review has kind of been all over the place, but ultimately I enjoyed a decent amount of it. It's a crazy film, and it doesn't always work, but there were moments of genuine enjoyment. And even when it wasn't quite that, it's so bizarrely insane that you gotta see it for yourself to really believe it. So I do weirdly recommend this movie if the curiosity is getting the best of you with it. Not much else to say, but I'll give it credit for being certainly more creative than any live action Disney remake. So take that for what it's worth. And I'm gonna give Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers a 6 out of 10. Yeah, 6 out of 10. Let's go with that. And I really don't have much else to say because that took a lot out of me. So have a good night, I guess.